Hi, and welcome to another Seeking Asylum review here at Terribly Fun Films. I'm your host, Bobby, and today we're looking at Transmorphers, Fall of Man, which is a 2009 prequel to the 2007 movie Transmorphers. If you're curious why I'm not doing Transmorphers first, because this is a prequel, which means chronologically in terms of the storyline, this comes first. Transmorphers will be next, I promise you. Without further ado, let's see if this is any good. The movie starts off with a woman on a phone, on her cell phone, driving down a secluded part of a highway. She's about to go through a small town when her phone transmorphs into a little robot and shoots a laser through her head. This sends the Sheriff Hadley, played by Bruce Boxleitner, into a bit of a tailspin trying to figure out what happened and why these things are so odd, yada yada. Along the way, he meets various other people who all discover that alien robots are invading, and they are taking the shape and forms of our satellite dishes, our cell phones, our Jeeps, that kind of a thing, and are then lulling us into a false sense of security before killing us to terraform the Earth to take over our planet. That's kind of a ridiculous plot in the best possible way. The movie was directed by Scott Wheeler, who also worked on the Asylum's own Journey to the Center of the Earth and Martian Land, as well as other B-movies and such. And overall, I think he does a fairly good job. Some of the editing is a bit too jumbled to make a lot of sense, especially during a car chase sequence. There's a Jeep that's meant to be one of the Transmorphers, and I get that it's not meant to have somebody driving, because it's meant to be its own thing. And while in select shots you can definitely see somebody at the wheel of this Jeep, they do a mostly good job of editing around that, so it doesn't appear to have somebody driving. I understand that this is a super low budget, but it did mean that that sequence was very tightly, very quickly edited, so some of the geography and some of the action that happens doesn't make a lot of sense because they are trying to hide the fact that somebody's driving the Jeep. That's the only real big issue in terms of the action in the film, is that one scene. He doesn't quite get as much out of the early setup stuff. It's a little boring and very point and shoot, move on kind of direction there. Once the action and the sci-fi elements really kick in, though, he brings up the energy nicely, I think. The screenplay comes to us from Shane Van Dyke, who for a few years there was doing a string of movies for the Asylum, including Six Guns, and he also stars in this film as the character of Jake Van Ryberg. The screenplay is fairly good. Again, there's only one way the movie can end, based on the events of the first Transmorphers movies, so that does take some of the suspense out of it. But your four main characters are easily likable, they have interesting stories, that sort of a thing, and the dialogue doesn't sound as awkward and as unnatural as it could have, despite the amount of pseudo-science mumbo-jumbo that is contained in the script. But it's a movie called Transmorphers Fall of Man. We're not really here for the dialogue or the characters. Freaking Bruce Boxleitner, who's done a series of Asylum films, aside from this one, including something like King of the Lost World, is a lot of fun here. He gets to play a grizzled old cop, and it's clear that he's just having a ball. he gets to mess around with these weird looking alien robots, and he gets to run around shooting guns and flying helicopters. He's having fun, and that fun translates very well to what we see as an audience on the screen. The doctor who discovers the signal that the alien robots are using to summon the rest of their fleet is Dr. Joe Summers, played by Jennifer Rubin, who is good, but when stating all the sciencey things and working at her computer and being focused on that aspect of her character, she's very good, very believable. But in the later section of the film, where it's a more action heavy, she doesn't hold her own too well there. She's never that credible as an action heroine, and that does hurt the movie a little bit. As mentioned, Shane Van Dyke is your nominal hero for the film. Jake Van Ryberg, who's an ex-soldier who's just returned to his small town and is now a satellite repairman. He shows up to his ex-girlfriend's house, his ex-girlfriend's grandma's house, and that's the start of all the craziness happening. And he's really good. He and Alana DiMari, playing his girlfriend, don't have too much chemistry together, but he's believable as an ex-soldier. He's believable as somebody who would know all this tech stuff. In terms of all the character beats, he hits them fairly well. He's instantly likable when you see him. He has a certain amount of charisma that makes him engaging to watch. So he's a good lead. Alana DiMaria plays Madison Ryan, who is sort of a civilian female lead, aside from the Dr. Joe. And she's alright. I do believe that she really cares for all her family members. Her grandma, her uncle, Bruce Boxleitner's character, and so on and so forth. By a lot of the time, she isn't seeming as awed or as scared of the various alien robots that we see as her actors, and that makes her character a bit hard to swallow, if that makes sense. It's kind of hard to relate to because she doesn't seem to be having a natural reaction to the events going on around her, which does hurt the movie a little bit. The score came to us from the two Chris's, Kano and Ridenhout, which of course means what, my friends? That yes, it's freaking incredible. I actually forgot how much I enjoyed the score from the first time I had to watch this movie until now. And then I'm watching the movie, and during the rather boring opening credits sequence, let me pause my thought. A lot of Asylum movies open up with just various flying shots to set up the geography of wherever we're going to be. Sleeping Beauty did it. King of the Lost World does it. Lots of their films open this way. Transmorphers Fall of Man opens this way. And it's the single oddest one of their films I've ever seen open in this regard. It does not work in this case. It doesn't set up the sci-fi aspect. It's just a city with a highway and cars driving by it. It's really boring, and the score is this big, epic, monumental thing going on over these opening titles, and it doesn't match. It doesn't work. It's a really weird thing. That is not to say that the score is bad in its own right. It's not. It's just that the score provided for this opening title sequence doesn't match what we're seeing in the opening title sequence, which is a bit odd. But the score itself is fantastic. They've done so many good scores. I'm not quite prepared to say it's my favorite of theirs, because I would have to go back and listen to and rewatch so many movies. Between the two, they have probably done at least 19 billion Asylum films at this point. and their collaborations are always some of the best. But so even if I'm not prepared to say it's my all-time absolute favorite, I will say it's probably in my top 5. The score here is rousing and intense and adventurous, and the theme for when the robots are around is really great. It has a slight like lo-fi ambient buzz noise, sort of like when the cable on your TV goes out and you just lift that white screen and it makes that buzzing noise type thing. And that's a lot of fun to listen to. Really love the score. B-movie auteur Mark Atkins was the cinematographer, and this movie looks fairly good. There's a sort of golden, dusty, like, filter over a lot of the film, especially in the later scenes, but it looks good. There's a lot of depth of field and a lot of interesting angles to watch the various robot action from, so that's exciting. The visual effects by Tiny Juggernaut, and the robots look really good. A few of them look very sort of stop motion at moments, kind of plasticky. But for the most part, especially the smaller robots, look really good. They interact with their environments and with the human actors fairly well. And the amount of detail put into them, the glowing lights and the joints you can see that are moving when they're reaching out, grabbing things and stuff, really engaging. It's clear a lot of effort went into their design, and that's of course always appreciated. The editing, outside of that one jumbled car chase scene, is mostly fairly good. Sadly, on my Blu-ray disc, there is a bit of a transfer issue where there's some weird ghosting going on. So that does make some of the edits a bit hard to properly judge. So I'm not going to hold that against the editor himself, but it does mar the viewing of it. So if you do get the film, get it on DVD. I know it looks better than that. I'm not sure what happened in that regard, or if I just have a faulty disc and it's not all Blu-ray discs that are like that for this movie. Anyways, the editing's mostly really good, really crisp. There's a nice sequence where Madison needs to cause a distraction, so Jake and Dr. Joe can run off to a tower to try to stop the signal, and so Hadley can get to a helicopter to destroy the robot that's in the way. And that scene is really well edited, from them planning it to following each group, the 3 groups, and what they're doing to the conclusion of that. It's really intense and interesting, and I think that worked out really, really well in their favor. So, yay! The movie has a lot of good elements to it. And if you're asking me if it works overall, yes. As a whole, complete entity, the pros outweigh the cons for this film. However, it does have issues. There's some awkward editing, there's some meh acting, and there aren't that many surprises in the story because there just can't be, given that it's a prequel. However, if you can accept all that, if you can accept the low budget of an Asylum movie, you will be treated to some pretty cool robot action sequences, to Bruce Boxleitner having the time of his life, and to some better than you would expect science-y mumbo jumbo that makes for some goofy but fun dialogue. So, thank you for watching this latest Seeking Asylum, and stay tuned for my next review, which will be Transmorphers. Until next time.